Imagine walking into a multi-million-dollar bank with nothing but holes in your shoes, completely unaware that a piece of plastic in your pocket is about to completely shatter the lives of everyone inside. The blistering midday sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt of the bustling city, but for Leo, the heat was the least of his concerns. His entire universe had shrunk to the rhythmic, painful thud of his worn-out shoes hitting the pavement, shoes that were more duct tape and prayer than actual leather, with the sole of the left one flapping open like a hungry mouth with every step he took. For 3 years, Leo had walked this earth as a ghost in plain sight, an invisible young man wearing a faded, oversized jacket that had seen better decades, his face perpetually smudged with the dust of the construction sites where he pulled 12-hour shifts just to afford a loaf of bread and a roof that leaked every time it drizzled. People crossed the street when they saw him coming, wrapping their designer coats tighter around themselves as if poverty were a contagious disease they could catch just by looking into his hollow, exhausted eyes. But Leo didn't care about their judgment anymore. His heart was heavy with a burden so profound that it numbed him to the sneers of the world, a burden tied to a promise he had made to his dying mother in a cramped, sterile hospital room just days before she closed her eyes forever. She had handed him a battered, dirt-stained plastic card with a faded chip, whispering with her final, ragged breath that no matter how dark the night became, he must never give up hope, and that when the time was truly right, the answers to their suffering would be found behind the glass doors of the grandest institution in the city. Leo had kept that card tucked into the deepest, most secure pocket of his torn jeans, a sacred relic of a life before the darkness took over, waiting for the day he felt strong enough to face whatever truth it held. Today was that day, not because he felt strong, but because he had finally reached the absolute end of his rope, down to his last copper coin, with his landlord threatening to throw his meager belongings onto the street by sunset. His stomach growled a fierce, agonizing protest against the fast that had lasted for 2 full days, but Leo pressed on, his eyes locked onto the towering, monolithic glass structure of the Imperial National Bank that loomed in the distance like a fortress of unattainable wealth. As he approached the monolithic building, the sheer contrast between his tattered existence and the opulent, gleaming marble pillars of the financial empire made his breath catch in his throat, each step forward requiring a monumental act of will as the flapped sole of his shoe made a pathetic, dragging sound against the pristine, polished granite steps. He could feel the eyes of the affluent passers-by drilling into his back, their hushed whispers and sharp gasps of disgust cutting through the humid air like knives, yet he refused to look down, drawing a deep, shuddering breath as he pushed against the heavy, gold-rimmed revolving glass doors and stepped into a world he had only ever dreamed existed. If this powerful story of justice, humility, and the ultimate triumph of the underdog inspired you to always treat every human being with respect regardless of their appearance, please hit that subscribe button right now to join our family for more life-changing and deeply emotional stories that will touch your heart and change your perspective forever. The interior of the Imperial National Bank was a cathedral of capitalism, a breathtaking expanse of soaring vaulted ceilings, shimmering crystal chandeliers that cast a warm, golden glow over the immaculate white marble floors, and the soft, rhythmic hum of high-stakes wealth-changing hands. Well-dressed men in bespoke Italian suits and women draped in silk and diamonds glided across the floor like royalty, their laughter light and careless, creating an atmosphere of impenetrable exclusivity that instantly made Leo feel like an alien invader. The moment his torn, mud-caked shoe crossed the threshold, leaving a faint, dusty smudge on the mirror-like floor, the ambient noise of the bank seemed to drop an octave, a sudden, suffocating silence spreading through the immediate area as security guards instantly tensed, their hands instinctively dropping to their holsters. Standing at the center of this financial kingdom was the branch manager, Mr. Julian Vance, a man whose arrogance was as sharply tailored as his 3-piece pinstripe suit, his hair slicked back perfectly, and an expression of profound disdain permanently etched onto his aristocratic features. Julian prided himself on maintaining the purity of his branch, believing that wealth was not just a number, but a measure of human worth, and the sight of a ragged, dirty young man standing in his pristine lobby was an insult to everything he stood for. He watched with a mixture of amusement and utter revulsion as Leo, trembling slightly but holding his head high, bypassed the automated kiosks and began walking toward the premium teller counters, his broken shoe making a distinct shuck-shuck sound that echoed loudly against the marble walls. The security guards moved to intercept the intruder, but Julian raised a manicured hand, signaling them to hold back, he wanted to personally humiliate this vagrant, to make an example out of him for daring to defile the sanctuary of the elite. Julian stepped forward, planting himself directly in Leo's path, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes scanning Leo's torn clothes, the exposed toes peeking through the ripped canvas of his shoes, and the smudge of dirt on his cheek with a sneer so cold it could freeze water. "I think you've lost your way, boy," Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension, loud enough to ensure that every wealthy client in the lobby could hear him clearly. "The soup kitchen is 3 blocks down, and we don't allow panhandling inside this institution, so turn your pathetic self around before I have my men throw you out onto the curb where you belong." If this powerful story of justice, humility, and the ultimate triumph of the underdog inspired you to always treat every human being with respect regardless of their appearance, please hit that subscribe button right now to join our family for more life-changing and deeply emotional stories that will touch your heart and change your perspective forever. Leo stopped dead in his tracks, the manager's cruel words washing over him, but instead of shrinking back in shame as Julian expected, Leo looked the older man dead in the eye, his gaze steady, calm, and entirely devoid of the fear that usually filled the eyes of the destitute. "I am not here to beg, sir," Leo said, his voice surprisingly deep and resonant, possessing a quiet dignity that briefly caught Julian off guard. "I am a citizen, and I have an account here. I simply wish to check my balance and make a withdrawal if possible." A stunned silence hung in the air for a fraction of a second before Julian burst into a loud, mocking laugh, a theatrical display of amusement that encouraged several of the nearby elite clients to join in, their snickers echoing cruelly throughout the massive lobby. "An account? You?" Julian jeered, stepping closer so that the scent of his expensive cologne overwhelmed Leo's senses. "Look at yourself. You look like you haven't seen a bar of soap in a month, your shoes are literally falling apart at the seams, and you claim to hold an account at the most prestigious bank in the country. What do you have in there, young man? 3 cents and a piece of lint. This bank requires a minimum balance that your entire extended family couldn't earn in 3 lifetimes, so stop wasting my time with your delusions and get out." Leo's hand trembled slightly as he reached into his deep pocket, his fingers closing around the cold, battered plastic card his mother had given him, drawing it out with a slow, deliberate motion that drew the sharp gaze of the security guards. He held the card out toward the manager, its faded logo barely legible under the layers of scratches, a stark contrast to the gold and platinum cards being brandished by the other patrons. Julian looked at the piece of plastic as if it were a dead rodent, refusing to touch it with his own hands, instead snapping his fingers sharply to summon a young, nervous-looking teller named Sarah who had been watching the scene unfold with a look of profound sympathy in her eyes. "Sarah, take this, object," Julian ordered sneeringly, waving his hand dismissively. "Take it to the terminal, swipe it, and let's read aloud exactly how many pennies this gentleman has to his name so we can all enjoy a good laugh before security escorts him to jail for vagrancy and creating a public nuisance." If this powerful story of justice, humility, and the ultimate triumph of the underdog inspired you to always treat every human being with respect regardless of their appearance, please hit that subscribe button right now to join our family for more life-changing and deeply emotional stories that will touch your heart and change your perspective forever. Sarah took the card gently from Leo's rough, calloused hands, offering him a small, apologetic smile that gave him a momentary spark of warmth in the midst of the freezing hostility of the room. She walked behind the secure glass partition, her fingers flying over the keyboard of the high-speed terminal as Julian stood right outside her cubicle, his arms crossed, a smug, triumphant grin on his face as he prepared to read the zero balance aloud to the waiting crowd of spectators. The card slid through the magnetic reader with a soft, electronic beep, and for a few seconds, the screen remained blank as the bank's secure mainframe accessed a deeply buried, ultra-high security tier of accounts that hadn't been touched in over a decade. Suddenly, the terminal let out a series of high-pitched chimes, a sound reserved only for the activation of presidential-level accounts, and the monitor flashed a bright, warning red before displaying a massive stream of data that made Sarah's breath instantly catch in her throat. Her eyes grew wide as saucers, her hands flying to her mouth to stifle a scream of pure shock as she stared at the screen, the numbers multiplying, row after row, a string of zeros so long that she had to count them 3 times to make sure her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. Julian, growing impatient with her sudden paralysis, frowned deeply and stepped behind the counter, pushing Sarah aside rudely. What is taking so long? Just read the pathetic number so we can. Julian's voice cut off abruptly, the words dying in his throat as his eyes locked onto the glowing computer screen, the smug grin wiping off his face so fast it was as if he had been struck by lightning. The screen didn't show a balance of zero, nor did it show a few dollars. It displayed an elite, legacy multi-billion-dollar trust account, a legendary fund established by the city's founding industrialist who had vanished years ago, left entirely to his sole heir, Leo. The account balance read an astronomical, unfathomable $985 million, with an additional compound interest stream that was growing by thousands of dollars every single second, accompanied by a flashing directive that read, full administrative access granted. Treat holder with absolute executive priority. If this powerful story of justice, humility, and the ultimate triumph of the underdog inspired you to always treat every human being with respect regardless of their appearance, please hit that subscribe button right now to join our family for more life-changing and deeply emotional stories that will touch your heart and change your perspective forever. The silence that fell over the grand lobby of the Imperial National Bank was no longer mocking or dismissive. It was a heavy, suffocating weight that seemed to crush the very air out of the room as Julian stood absolutely frozen in place, his face turning an ashen, ghostly white while his knees trembled so violently that he had to grip the edge of the mahogany desk to keep from collapsing entirely onto the polished marble floor. The very man he had called a vagrant, the boy he had openly mocked for his torn shoes and dirty clothes, was not just wealthy, he was now revealed to be the single largest individual shareholder of the entire global banking corporation, effectively making him Julian's ultimate boss and the undisputed master of the institution. Slowly, with agonizing effort, Julian turned around to face Leo, his lifetime of arrogance completely shattered into dust, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror as he fully realized that with a single word or a casual wave of his hand, this young man could ruin his career, obliterate his reputation, and strip away his comfortable life forever. He stumbled out from behind the secure glass counter, his expensive Italian leather shoes sliding helplessly on the mirror-like floor, and practically threw himself at Leo's feet, his voice shaking uncontrollably as he began to beg for mercy, his polished, untouchable exterior completely gone as tears of panic welled in his eyes. "Sir, Mr. Leo, please, I beg of you to forgive me, I didn't know, I was blind, I am an absolute fool who didn't recognize greatness." Julian cried out, his voice cracking with desperation as the entire lobby watched in absolute, stunned disbelief, the wealthy clients gasping in shock as they realized the ragged boy they had sneered at was actually a hidden billionaire capable of buying the entire block. Leo looked down at the weeping, trembling manager, his expression remaining entirely calm, steady, and completely unmoved by the dramatic display of false penitence, his mind flashing back to the long, freezing nights of hunger, the agonizing pain of the construction work, and the sacred memory of his mother who had endured so much silent suffering while this very bank held their rightful fortune. "You didn't see a human being when I walked in, Julian, you only saw my torn shoes, and you judged my entire worth by the dust on my clothes," Leo said softly, his deep voice carrying an immense, echoing weight that silenced the entire room and brought a profound chill to everyone who had laughed earlier. Wealth doesn't change who a person is at their core, but it certainly reveals the true colors of everyone else around them. "Sarah, please withdraw $100,000 in cash immediately to handle my urgent needs, and as for you, Julian, you are relieved of your duties at this bank effective immediately, perhaps now you will finally learn what it feels like to walk a mile in broken shoes." Leo took his newly printed black diamond card and the neatly packed cash from a smiling, tearful Sarah, walking out of the bank with the exact same quiet dignity he had entered with, his flapped shoe still making its rhythmic, dragging sound against the floor, but his head held high as he stepped out into the bright sunshine toward a future where he would use his billions to build shelters, schools, and funding programs to ensure that no one would ever be mocked for their poverty again, leaving behind an unforgettable legacy of true honor, kindness, and poetic justice. If this powerful story of justice, humility, and the ultimate triumph of the underdog inspired you to always treat every human being with respect regardless of their appearance, please hit that subscribe button right now to join our family for more life-changing and deeply emotional stories that will touch your heart and change your perspective forever.